Welcome back, everybody, to me being mildly annoyed by the Wheel of Time. We're continuing our drudgery through Crossroads of Twilight. That's not not that bad so far. Don't get me wrong, there's still stuff to be annoyed about, and we'll talk about it in a minute. But yeah. This will be about chapters 4 to and including 10, which brings us up to the roughly 40% mark. So we'll do the next 20% on tomorrow, and we'll be done with it on Friday, and then I'll do something fun over the weekend, and we'll be back with what's it called, Knife of Dreams on Monday, and we'll see if I can also push through that one in an entire week. I hope so. So we can actually get into that final trilogy of and see how the addition of Brandon Sanderson, whose writing I have in not the best of memories, how he does with this mess of a book. So let's go and talk about these kind of things, shall we? Why, cheers. All right, let's do this. This is sort of we'll jump around in a bunch of chapters here. We'll meet a bunch of people, and all of this follows one pattern that we've seen already yesterday. But I think it's important to keep that whole thing in mind. What I'm trying to say here is, we'll go back and see what's going on in Abu Dar on the Shanshan's side of things. We'll also jump and see what's going down with Perrin. Yes, he's still alive. We'll see what's going on with Fail, and we'll see what's going down with Elaine. And let's start with something that all these have in common that I personally think is really cool. Structure-wise, yes, Robert Jordan actually doing something interesting when it comes to structure of a story. Who'd have thought it? And I always say that I'll try to be even-handed in my criticism and mention the good things as well as the bad things. So let's start with this. So these chapters all follow a specific pattern, and that is they tell us or show us what all those characters that we've learned, met before, what all of them do or did or whatever, while Rand was cleansing Sidar. Sidar? No, Sidene. I always confuse those two. While Rand and Nynaeve are cleansing Sidene. We don't see the effects of it yet, which apparently is a point of criticism, or so I've been told yesterday. But we see where those people were, and I like that aspect. I like that idea. So here's the thing, is like, we all oftentimes, I assume most of us, depending on which generation we are, we have like this one event that, like, years later, decades later, whatever, we all know sort of like where we were, what we did in that moment. That one precipitous thing happened that changed the world forever, right? I guess for my generation, roughly my generation, or a lot of people that I guess, like, all the way up to, say, born in like 95 or whatever, that would be 9/11. 2001, because it's one of those like huge events where, like, yeah, where were you when that happened? And I guess most of like us of that generation, at least in places with like general media and even the beginnings of social media, we remember that moment, that one thing, and like after that the world was a different place. And whether you want to admit that or not, yes, it was a different place. It doesn't matter what you think about the actual event. It's one of those huge things that I guess, like, look back about like 20 years earlier. I guess the events at Chernobyl was, at least for Europe, were one of those things where suddenly the world was a different place. Maybe the explosion of, was it Challenger, one of those spaceships, was a different, like, same one, roughly the same one, was also in 86 when I come to think about it. So maybe, those kind of events that you're like, where was I when that happened? Where were you when Kennedy was shot? It's like, those things, when you remember, like, how a specific event, like, works as a focus to everything you do, and then the world is a different place and you need to figure out what the world is afterwards. And looking at what is going down in the Wheel of Time world right now, Cleansing the male half of the source, cleansing Sidene, is exactly that event, because while killing one of the Forsaken may be, a big deal in a lot of ways, it's not the same thing as actually fundamentally changing the way the world works. Because so much in this world is built on what happens, is built on the assumption that men who channel will, become, lose their sanity at some point. I still have issues with that idea, but put that aside. Like, the entire world assumes that man should not challenge because the taint on the source will kill them over short or long. And to remove that basic assumption of the world is a huge fucking deal. Apart from what it actually means for men who can channel, it just means, for everyone in the world, it means a fundamental change. So focusing on that event from all these different perspectives, Rand, Matt, Rand, of course, very normal, Matt, Perrin, all the other, the Aes Sedai, Elaine and gang, that makes a lot of sense to drive home that effect. Because while it might be interesting to see how the Ashaman will feel once they figure out what happened, to see that something huge, the world has shifted, and everyone needs to reorientate themselves and figure out what's going down. But to have that bit here, I think, is a really cool idea to do it that way, and, just jump to each of those characters to find out what they were doing in exactly that moment. And so, yeah, structure-wise, I really appreciate that approach. And yeah, I want to find out how it, what it actually changes to have that cleansed, how people will feel and so forth. But for now, I'm happy with the way it is, just handled in this book, when we just, jump around and see what was Matt doing? What was Perrin doing? What is Fael doing? What is whoever doing? It makes sense to do that. So yeah, here you have it, my little bit of praise for Robert Jordan and why I think he does a good job with Crossroads of Twilight here. We will see where this will be going in the future, because I guess we're mostly done with viewpoint characters that need to come across that. But we will see. So let's look at the individuals and what they are doing. Now we start out with a new character here, and that is Ebudar, in Ebudar with one of the Death Watch soldiers. And I think we've met him before in a short viewpoint back in... Oh, that must have been Winter's Heart? Maybe? No, not Winter's Heart, one before that. Maybe Path of Daggers. Could have been Path of Daggers, I assume. When Rand is, killing people in the hills, right? Killing Seanchan in the hills of Altara. And we have, for a short bit, we have one viewpoint character that is a Death Watch captain or general or whatever. I guess it's the same dude? But I don't know. Anyway, what we see is we start another plot thread, because that dude sets out to hunt the Lady Tuan, prompted by that same annoying seeker who shows up all the time and is... Here we have an interesting aspect, right? So that guy shows up all the way back to Shadow Rising. Oh, we need to talk about that in a minute as well, because I forgot to talk about it yesterday, but yeah. So that white blonde, blue-eyed seeker for truth and wrong book. For truth and penitence. Anyway, that seeker guy, he shows up and hustles Igyanan, then he gets punched out by someone while Igyanan and gang are sitting in that inn in Tanchico, and he shows up all the time, and he's still hassling Igyanan because he thinks she's part of a huge conspiracy, which she's not, I guess, but you never know. Anyway, he shows up and tells all kinds of weird stuff to that Death Watch captain, and then a Death Watch captain takes his gang and moves out to follow Tuan, I guess, and hopefully they'll find her or not, and we'll see what goes down. If I guess what will happen is, because that guy is super loyal to Tuan personally, which he should not be. He should be loyal to the Crystal Throne, but he's mostly loyal to Tuan for reasons. I assume at some point he'll switch, his loyalty fully to Tuon, and then Tuon and Matt will do stuff in the land. But we'll find out when we'll find out. This is me guessing stuff, right? Because we follow these kind of patterns along a lot of the time, right here. Anyway, what's interesting about that? Not that much. I mean, it's adding some sort of tension to the whole flight of Igyan and Tuon and gang makes a lot of sense, because otherwise, like, if no one bothers to follow them, well, they'll just like end up somewhere, and who cares? So having pursuit going on will be cool. I guess we have the issue there once again. The I don't know, general. I don't want to call it racism, but it's a sort of weird idea of people, of primitive people. I'll say primitive for now. We'll talk about it in a second. Because our Death Watch captain, and by the way, is there any proof anywhere that Robert Jordan took the term Death Watch, which he apparently uses for the first time in a book in the early 2000s. If he took that from Warhammer 40k, or if that is just a neat coincidence. Anyway, the title Death Watch is pretty fucking cool, so no complaints there. My point is that a servant of our Death Watch guy, whose name I conveniently forgot, but it's something Tariq, Arik, whatever. Who cares? The guy will either die or I'll remember the name because he shows up again. Anyway, he has this like guy who's supposedly one of those wild hillmen who eat rats and lizards and drink out of skull cups. And see, the issue there is that it is so easy to fall into that stereotype. Like, how do we describe that person as a different culture? Well, he's half wild, and wild people eat weird shit, and it's kind of disgusting and whatnot. And I'm like, does it have to be that way? Aren't there like other ways to talk about like that, to show us that there are still like all kinds of different cultures within the empire? Not every Seanchan is Seanchan elite or whatever. Why does it have to be this weird way of doing it? It's like, he's still like half wild and not civilized and whatnot. It's like, are you trying to make a point about like the arrogance of civilization? Or are you just like cheaply going out and trying to make it very clear that this guy is not is different by being disgusting in a way? Well, not really disgusting because, at the end of the day, what's wrong with eating lizards or rats? Sylvester Stallone eats rat burgers in Demolition Man, and he knows what is good for him, right? Point is, however, that it's mildly annoying in that way because it's once again it's one of those tropes that we see in a lot of fantasy. That trope being a white, and I use white more as a term for civilized because it mostly happens in Western literature, as far as I'm aware, because I don't read that much Eastern literature. Anyway, point is, you have that hero, and he has his faithful, slightly odd, slightly barbaric native guide who is super useful, but also always, not of the same rank because he's of a different race, and that's sort of where that built-in it's a racist trope at the end of the day, and I don't like it at all. But we'll see if this is one of those or not, because we haven't seen that much of the people yet. But it's unnecessary. I know it's been used to death at this point, but maybe we could do without it in the future, because that would be really clever. He doesn't have to be Han Buri-Han, who's helping Theoden through the forest, and he doesn't have to be whatever we have in that regard in other stories of the times. Because this is a book written in 2000, 2001 even, maybe later, somewhere around that. We were aware of racism in the 2000s, even in southern United States, I assume. I hope so. Maybe still denying it, but probably aware of it. All right. Let us move on to Perrin. So Perrin is riding behind is following the Aiel with Fail. Isn't that funny? The Aiel with Fail. Sounds good. However, he's doing that, and yeah, well, it's still snowing. It's shitty. Everyone still hates him because they all think he got laid. Well, not got laid, but actually slept with her. I mean Berylane. Yes, it's true. In Book 10, Robert Jordan, for the first time, could bring himself to write the sentence, slept with her. Now, so after like using once laying with someone, which is a more biblical term, and otherwise usually avoiding the word like the plague, or saying cuddling instead, we finally come to the point where it is, yes, slept with her. I wonder if he'll ever use the word sex, because I doubt he'll ever go all the way to fucking. I don't think that will happen. Anyway, nothing really wrong. It's just like the weird, odd way Jordan uses prose, or Jordan's prose is so limited in a lot of ways because he seems to be too scared or uncomfortable to speak out certain things that have to do with sexuality. But, you know, apart from that, what's going on? So, yeah, we have an encounter, or not even an encounter, with those Shadow Brothers. What's that? They're like Darkhounds of Tindalos. Not of Tindalos, but you know what I mean. Those Darkhounds, and suddenly people know all kinds of things about these Darkhounds. In this case, people being one of the Aes Sedai, which is once again one of those like Robert Jordan. When he needs more information, he just includes it, and it's like, yeah, why didn't anyone ever ask about that crap before? Why does no one bother to? And suddenly a random Aes Sedai just knows all of that stuff. It just feels unrealistic, but it's something that we've seen before in these books. When he needs power, when people need a power up suddenly out of nowhere, that will happen. Or people suddenly know stuff where it's like, why did no one ask before? And why is suddenly someone there who actually knows that stuff? It feels a bit contrived, but yeah. We will see if all of that will be interesting later on in like another situation. But like, I think my problem with it is that for a lot of that stuff seeming to be, you know, supposed to be like super scary and unknown, and most people living in like innocent ignorance of Trollocs and all of that stuff, suddenly all of a sudden like a lot of people know an awful lot about that stuff, and I'm like, wow, do you know that? But yeah, it is what it is. It's not exactly a big deal. In general, that part is fairly good, though. You know, we have a bit of like character development. Perrin takes Bolver, that like spy master, in sort of, and makes him officially sort of his spy master, I guess, in a lot of ways. Some of Fael's pseudo-Aiel are now spying in Massima's place, and we see that there's some sort of intrigue going on with Massima, and I think that's one of the things that I don't fully understand yet, or where it could go either way, because apparently Massima is plotting in some way, dealing with the Seanchan, maybe also with the White Cloaks, maybe even with the Shadow Aiel. We don't know, but the question there is, if he is completely a complete religious fanatic and everything, as we are told by everyone saying that he's mad, rabid almost, and, you know, having all these comparisons, then how is someone in that state of religious frenzy apparently able to have a really complex intrigue going with like goals that lie outside his like religious madness, his religious fanaticism? That's something I don't understand. And there might be ways to do that. I'm not sure how Robert Jordan will pull it off, though, because like basically the logical conclusions are either his religious madness is feigned and he's really playing a deep game in evil, or it doesn't add up. Because yeah, or he's being used by someone who exploits his religious madness. Both are possible. I just don't know which one it is, and I have certain doubts that Robert Jordan does at this point. So we'll find out in the future, I assume, because at some point there will be a confrontation with Masima. This time around, we don't get it. We have just a bit of a interaction with what's her name, Berylane, and the whole question of like, why does everyone believe I fucked Berylane and they hate me because of it, and she doesn't do anything about it and tell anyone that it wasn't true? Like, yeah, it's an annoying bit of story because I don't know what Robert Jordan is trying to do with it, apart from playing with that idea that basically there is always the threat that a woman can claim sexual intercourse with a main man to ruin that man's reputation, which is weird because usually mostly like patriarchal societies, well, in the West at least, like usually with tied up sexual morality, it's usually the other way around. Where it's like if there's only the rumor that a woman has slept with more than one man or whatever, you have all these terrible ideas that like that's bad, and the whole soiled goods kind of bullshit arguments that you get there, and I'm like, but that narrative that women can ruin a man's reputation with false accusations or rumors is something that you see a lot in misogynist circles, and so far I don't see any reason to have that storyline in this book apart from dragging up that that illusion of this being an actual real problem. It's like, why is it is not serving any purpose apart from showing us that yes, this still happens and women are evil and use that. And it's like, no. That you need some sort of reason apart from just being a bitch, basically. But then again, Robert Jordan, character motivation. He has heard of it maybe sometimes, but not really. So who knows? What's else going on there? Well, they've found the Aiel. They're in a town. They teleport through that portal there, and when they're there, that's exactly when it happens. And then everyone is like, both Ashaman and Aes Sedai are like, "Whoa, something big's going down. We need to find out." And Perrin is like, "No, we don't. It's Rand's problem. Let him deal with that crap." Which is a pretty clever way of doing it. And I guess what we'll learn, come towards there will be some sort of showdown around that town that the Aiel have, the Shido have conquered, are currently in. Will it end with Perrin actually getting Fael back? I don't know. I mean, who knows at this point? But that's sort of what we see here. So that's one of those where are we when Rand changes the world? Apparently, Perrin is overlooking a town, and trying to figure out how to get Fael out of the Shadow camp. The other bit that I personally really like is that apparently there's some sort of intrigue thing going down with some of the Aes Sedai, with Perrin actually spying for or whatever or talking with Masima. We don't know what's going down there. We'll find out, I'm sure. For now, it's a mystery. But also, once again, Berylane is, while being a bitch in that one regard, also helping Perrin a lot by, sharing information and all of that stuff. It's an interesting thing because I feel Berylane could be a wonderful character in this story, but it's suffering from these aspects where Robert Jordan is just incapable of having a purely good woman happening or whatever. They have to be slightly worse than all the men, all the time. All right, let's look at the next one. Fael. Fael is in that city, trying to escape, making plans and all of that stuff. And we get more just humiliation porn for some reason. I know there's some plans to it, but mostly we see how the Shido are a dissolute bunch, because they're obviously, the bad ones, we know that. And how they are making plans, everyone is bullying everyone. Fael is supposed to spy on Savannah for the other wise ones. They're also supposed to steal that oath rod for Galena. but most of it is just an excuse for Robert Jordan to talk about how to tell us stories about how women are humiliated, which is just grabbed by some dude on the street and almost forced into something that I guess just didn't happen, because then he would have probably have to write words like rape or whatever. Although he has used the word rape before, so he's maybe not afraid of that one. But anyway, she gets freed from that by the other guy, Roland, who is apparently no gunslinger, but he's the guy who like spanked her before and she almost liked it, and now he's sort of trying to protect her and maybe getting her laid. We will see, getting it on with her. We will find out in the future. And then we also see two of her helpers who try to escape, being, stripped naked and hogtied and displayed to everyone, because it's all about that shame, isn't it? And Faye later gets the same thing, and then our good buddy Roland shows up to, support her and whatnot. And a lot of it feels, once again, gratuitous. And it's one of those things that I don't get it. Like, it's a general thing with these books, right? It's like that all kinds of punishments or consequences for at least women in these books are always humiliation. Usually humiliation with a sexual connotation. It's like, whatever. Right? If it's Amathera being, stripped naked and tied to a bedpost and forced to sing lewd songs as by one of the Black Aja, whether it's, Fail having to be forced, naked and stand in the snow, not being hogtied in the snow. It's like, why the fuck is all of this always about like undressing women and then forcing them to do something they don't want to do? It just feels like this is more than just it doesn't make any sense apart from apparently Robert Jordan gets off on it. And that's sort of where I see the problems. Like, there are thousands of ways to, punish people for all kinds of imagined or real infractions. There's all kinds of things, but apparently everything in these books is like stripping people naked and spanking them, or just forcing them to stand around naked. And all of that to give, Robert Jordan the excuse to write about like, ooh, naked woman standing somewhere. Sorry. So yeah, it just really doesn't really. It just rankles me because it feels unnecessary and it's too much of it for me. It's like, I know you've got some serious repression problems there, Bobby J, but please, could we maybe actually, do something more with it? I don't know. Let's continue to talk about more of that stuff, because the Shido are still like a huge problem. And there's two things that I want to talk about here. First one, it is also once again made clear, because they are evil and they're bad, and they're, especially Savannah and some others, they're primitive once again. And primitive people are like jackdaws. They want to get all those glittery things. And there's like that whole description where Fail walks through that town, and it's all about like how they take all the gold and glittery stuff. And they don't care about anything else, they just take all the gold and glittery stuff. And that is, once again, that is a terrible trope. It's like, yeah, those are savages. They don't understand actual worth or anything. So they just throw all of that stuff out. They take all the gold and glittery stuff, and then they heap themselves to the point of tastelessness, because we, as civilized people, we know how taste works. And it's not more is more. Unless you're Ingrid Malmsteen and, you know what I mean. So having that trope repeated again and again, it's all about greed, but a primitive greed that is just about like how much glittery shit can I pile up. That is, that's racist if you reduce groups that you paint as, uncivilized, reduce them to just like wanting to grab as much gaudy shit as possible. Because that's not how that works. And if you assume that, you basically, you degrade those people. And having that happen to, that very specific group of also bad savages, unlike the noble savages, which are, the other side of the Aiel. The noble savages that are all about purity and restraint and only very few bits and pieces that look good and stuff like. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's racist, and it's annoying as fuck. I just really, really, really don't see why it is there unless it is laziness, which brings us to the other small bit there. There's another one of those description of Savannah, who has a greedy mouth, as we know from Robert Jordan's quick career in porn story writing. Now, she also has her a look of avarice surrounds her pouting mouth, and it's that kind of description that really annoys me because it is so lazy. Like, I'm obviously no good judge of facial expressions, and I'm not sure how you would actually judge someone's facial expression as a look of avarice around their mouth. I don't know how you would do that, but if you write it down as a description in your prose, you make what you do as a writer. What Bobby J does is he links character attributes with physical appearance. And I always feel that is lazy. If you want to show me that Savannah is greedy, that's fine. If you think that greed is that one thing that her character has, because apparently that's all she is greedy. If you want to do that, that's fine. You can even talk about how she's gathering all these stuff, having way too many Guy Shine, having all of this stuff, loving silk, and you can do all of that. You don't have to tell me that she has a greedy mouth or that she has a look of avarice around her mouth. It's laziness at the end of the day. And it's something that Robert Jordan does a lot in with these characters. He very often ties physical appearance with judgment of character already, and I personally just don't like it. And to see it here again is just the same thing. Plus, the whole idea of the Shido, especially those guys, the evil Shido like Savannah, being all about greed and not understanding actual worth, but just taking the glittery bits and pieces. As I said, it's at the end of the day, it's racist because it basically calls them primitive in a way that is. They're not they have a different culture. No, they have a less good culture, a worse culture, because, the way you describe it is judgmental. And that's what we see here, and I just don't like it. It just annoys me, and it's unnecessary. It's so fucking unnecessary. At this point, you don't have to say, with all the other stuff that you put in there already, all the other annoying stuff, you don't have to say there's a look of avarice around her mouth. It's no, we know she wants shit. We have figured it out. We're 10 books in, Bobby J. We do know. All right. Anyway, there's obviously some form of conflict within the camp of the Shido, and we'll see where that will be going in the future. But they also learned, obviously, that Rand was channeling, or someone was channeling, and crazy shit was going down. And they are trying to figure out what to do. But from what I can see, they also Savannah decides to stay in that town. So this is what we'll see, probably looking at the pacing. Probably for most of the rest of this book, we will have Perrin and Fael chapters around that town. We'll see. Apart from that, nothing much really happening there. It's fairly solid because people, trying stuff out. I don't mind the slower pace. Let's look to the last one. That is Elaine and Avienda making the rounds of the country and looking at, trying to get support for, Elaine as queen or future queen of Andor. And the general idea is solid. The idea of, having the love of the common people, all of that stuff, because we know Andor is that kind of place. They have good monarchs, good queens, and all of the people really love their queens because the queens are morally good and the people are upstanding and don't take bullshit or intrigue from their betters and whatnot, because they are, white Andoran Protestants, all of them. And yeah, it's a bit simplistic, but whatever. I think the more interesting bit, once again, is that we have Robert Jordan. Either your time scale is fucked, or you really have no idea how pregnancy works. Because, yeah, she's apparently already having all these mood swings. We're only 2 or 3 weeks in, from what I can tell, time-wise. And I just don't really like that way how all of that stuff works. Now, there's one interesting thing here, apart from, once again, his just inept descriptions of Elaine being pregnant and everyone around her treating her differently, and she being different from the moment that she knows that she's pregnant and all that stuff. I don't know. I feel it should not be a man writing that kind of thing, because it feels like you're writing about something that you don't understand. So you know what I mean? It just feels like that. But I guess it's what we have to live with. Now, what I want to focus on here is one of the weird things: the ghost. So part of that chapter is Elaine dealing with a maid there in that place that she's visiting, that house, that mansion, I guess. And she turns around, she's scared because she has seen the ghost of the old lady of that house. And I'm just the fuck? Because either ghosts suddenly exist in this world, which would be neat, and there could be all kinds of explanations and stuff, or Robert Jordan just put this in out of no reason whatsoever to fill that chapter with something, and paint serving people as stupid. Because we see that through Elaine's viewpoint. She don't see the ghost, and she treats that serving maid as a girl, even though it's mentioned that she's a bit older than Elaine and just a bit stupid and all of that. It's are you just putting this in to make fun of superstition and, people of a lower class? Or is there a deeper point to it that I don't see, or a deeper point that we don't see yet? And with Robert Jordan, you never know, because ghosts of the dead apparitions of that sort have not played any role in the first 10 books so far, as far as I can remember. Apart from, stuff in what's it in the dream world and stuff. Yeah, but apart from that, we have never heard anything about ghosts actually existing, showing up, or whatnot. So what's the point of that bit? Is it just to fill pages and have enough material for a small chapter that is all about how, everything is in motion, the countryside is clean and empty, and Elaine is pregnant, and then Rand does Randy things with not Randy things, you know what I mean, right? Rand pulls the trigger on cleansing Sidene. And then we have the conversation between Avienda and Elaine that boils down to the same thing as all the others did before. It's let Rand do Rand things. We can't help him anyway. Let's focus on the stuff that we can do, because, he's the Lord and Savior of mankind, so he'll probably figure it out on his own, I guess. And I'm not quite sure. It just felt odd to have that bit, because it completely breaks the character of the story so far, to suddenly focus on having a ghost appears. Either are you telling me that person is stupid, or are you telling me that stuff is actually changing because we will see more ghosts appearing, because during all that crap going down, maybe the barriers between the world of the living and the dead are slowly weakening and stuff, which would be cool. But I reserve judgment, because so far, Robert Jordan, trust I don't have, that kind of thing. Anyway, I think that's all for now. So far this book is slow, but people actually do a lot of stuff instead of sitting around and voicing unsavory opinions on relationships and other things. And I'm fine with that. There's one inconsistency that I feel makes a lot of sense to talk about because I think I forgot about it yesterday. And that's Egyanan, who is apparently highly upset about having to change her appearance to blend in and having to cut her hair and her fingernails because of, those odd customs and looks and stuff of the Shanchan. And I don't mind the idea in general of saying, yeah, they are forced out of their traditional styles and whatnot and they are tied to ranks in society and all of that stuff. I don't mind that aspect of it. What I think makes it weird and inconsistent is that we've seen Egyanan, the same character, although she was still Egyanan, not Eginen back then. You know what I mean? We've seen her in Shadow Rising. And she is in disguise, in not regular, but local clothes and local appearance and everything. She is like that in Tanshiko for a long time, and she doesn't mind at all. So why does she mind now? Is there anything in there that makes a lot of sense there? I don't think so. It feels inconsistent. If you want to make that point about characters feeling uncomfortable about having to change their appearance, you have other Shanchan you can do that to. You even have the daughter of the 9 fucking moons down there, and her servant and all of these other people. It's why do you pick the one person that has already done the same thing before and tell us that now she's uncomfortable about it? And it would even be better if we hadn't had Egyanan's viewpoint in Shadow Rising, but we had her viewpoint and her thoughts back then, and she was never complaining about having to disguise herself at all. Which is why I don't get it. I don't know. It just feels... It feels, once again, sloppy. And that's all I have to say about that. Anyway, enough of this for today. I'll be back tomorrow with the next bit of this book, and we'll see where the Crossroads of Twilight will actually lead us. What will happen tomorrow. Until then, have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.